Hello, everyone. Welcome to Accessibility Talks or ALI Talks, the monthly virtual meetup where we chat about digital accessibility, inclusivity, and usability. Each month, we invite a speaker to present on a topic, and afterwards, we invite the community to ask questions and participate in the discussion. Today, I am your lucky host. My name is Carrie Fisher. I work at GitHub as a Senior Accessibility Program Manager, and I use the pronouns she, her. Before we get too far into the talk, I want to let you know that we have live transcripts available at bit.ly/AliTalks, A11Y, TALKS live transcript. It's also pinned in the chat if you're watching live in YouTube. And if you would like, you can enable the YouTube closed captions as well if those work better for you. Let's take a quick moment to remind everyone that our group seeks to provide a friendly, safe environment. We require all participants to adhere to the Accessibility Talks Code of Conduct. This includes speakers and hosts, myself, and all those watching YouTube, folks commenting on social networks as well. This also applies to any community interaction and events, verbal questions, and chat in the text channels. The Code of Conduct can be found on our website at alitalks.com/conduct. All participants should engage in productive dialogue and should share and learn with each other in an atmosphere of mutual respect. All right, next, got questions. We love questions. At the end of the presentation, we always like to take a little bit of time with our speaker for some Q&A. But you don't have to wait until the very end to ask your question. You could ask the question as it comes to mind when you're listening to the presentation. So if you're watching live, you can type your questions into the YouTube chat window. It can be busy in the chat, so sometimes we ask you to add a Q or somehow designate it as a question so it like stands out further. Or if you're watching on social media or interacting on social media, you can use the hashtag AliTalks. That's A11YTALKS. And that's on Mastodon or Twitter/X, as it's called. We want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, including Agile Collective, who is our bronze sponsor for Accessibility Talks. We really appreciate your support. We also have ALI Cats Club members who donate monthly to ALI Talks, and we also have one-time donors as well. There are so many ways that you can get involved financially, and we thank you for your financial contributions. Want to see your organization recognized as a sponsor on ALI Talks, or even your name up there on the ALI Talks Cat Club? You can visit our sponsor page at alitalks.com/sponsorship to learn more about all of that. One more housekeeping item here on our slide here. If you're not aware, if you weren't aware already, today is GAD, or Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It's happening now. GAD aims to spark conversations, foster understanding, and promote learning about digital accessibility and inclusion, particularly for the over 1 billion individuals with disabilities or impairments. For many of us in the accessibility field, GAD is a great day to learn some new things or interact with people in the community, but also to give back like our speaker is doing today. So there are many GAD events to take part of, both virtual and in person, including this one today. You can dive into webinars, panels, and other sessions led by industry experts, all dedicated to spreading awareness and understanding of accessibility. Be sure to check out accessibility.day/events to find out what's happening in your area. All right, that was a lot of housekeeping, so appreciate you waiting through all of that to hear our speaker today. We have Sherry Byrne-Haber, who is an accessibility advocate. And I'm a big fan of Sherry's. I've been following her for many, many years. I know already that Sherry was a world-class archer, who I just found out PR'd this last tournament, so congratulations on that. But I also learned that she is the first Girl Scout in the US to do a badge in computer science. And that was almost, what did you say, almost 50 years ago where you created that badge?
It'll be 47 years this August. So,
That's
but I grew in Silicon Valley. So, had the advantage of having a father who was a VP at a startup and spent several years one day. It was a pet and said, here, learn how to use this.
Nice. I love that.
That was the beginning of my love of technology.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for braving the world of Silicon Valley and the Girl Scouts and creating that badge for future Girl Scouts to also uh, earn through their skills as well. So we appreciate that. And we're very excited for you today to give your talk. So with no further ado, I will hand it over to Sherry to talk about the future of accessibility and generative AI.
So thanks, Carrie. I appreciate the invitation. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So yes, my name is Sherry Bernhaber. My pronouns are she, her. Welcome to my kitchen. In addition to using a wheelchair, I have glaucoma, and so I need a lot of light, and my office doesn't give me enough light anymore, and I've got all these windows. So this is where I am in my very comfortable blue sweatshirt and ponytail and bifocals. So let me switch to my slideshow. Okay, so who am I? So yes, I was a Girl Scout, got a badge in computer science. I have a degree in computer science. Then 10 years after that, I went to law school. And then 10 years after that, I got an MBA. So very overeducated. I am a person with both congenital and acquired disabilities. I actually got into accessibility not because of my own wheelchair use. I was born with spina bifida, but because I have a daughter who's deaf. And you will do things for your children that you will not do for yourself. And so that I found it much easier to advocate for her, and then learned to advocate for myself better from there. This is a target from the last archery tournament, as Carrie mentioned. Love, love, love archery. Been doing it for almost 5 years now. And I scored 821 out of 900 last weekend at various different distances, but none of them shorter than 40 yards. So I'm pretty good at hitting the target, both in archery and providing advice about accessibility. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a bunch of acronyms that I'm going to use throughout this conversation, and just giving everybody this as a cheat sheet. So AI is artificial intelligence. Most people are familiar with that term. ML is a term that's frequently used, and it means machine learning. LLM, another really common term that you're going to hear me use today, large language model. I do try to stick to the non-acronym terms, but sometimes I accidentally fall back into the jargon, which is why I'm giving you this run through first. GPT, a lot of you, I'm sure all of you have heard of Chat GPT. But GPT actually has a meaning, and it's generative pre-trained transformers. And so I'm going to get to what that all means in a minute and what it means to you. Gen AI is another term, generative AI. So it's a kind of AI that generates content, and the content is usually text, images, or video. DSP is a good term to know. I don't use it very often in this particular presentation, but it's super common in the GPT world, in the, when you're asking an AI questions and getting answers. And DSP stands for define, search, predict. Okay, so how do they all intersect? First of all, I've got this great big outer sphere, which is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is the ability of a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. Then, as a subset of artificial intelligence, we have something called machine learning. And machine learning is a type of AI that allows a system to learn from experience. So you give it a predefined set of data. You tell it, you did this right, you did this wrong. And the machine learning actually learns from that and will refine its future behavior based on what it's learned. Then, as a subset of machine learning, we have yet another type called deep learning. And so deep learning uses more complex algorithms, and it creates these things called neural networks. And it uses that to learn again from its experience and to train these models that I'm going to talk about in a couple of slides. And then finally, the tiniest subset inside of all this is LLM, the large language model. So it's a type of deep learning, it's a type of AI, uses absolutely phenomenally massive data sets. And it understands, summarizes, generates, and then predicts new content. So LLM, large language models, is a type of deep learning, which is a type of machine learning, which is a type of AI. And so this is like the 2-minute overview of how all these things intersect when you hear all these terms used. Okay, so there's two different types of large language models. One of them is cheap computationally, and when we say cheap, we mean how much computer energy, how much memory, how much CPU, how much storage does it take for that LLM, large language model, to operate. And then we have a different kind, which is computationally expensive, requires huge amounts of computation, huge amounts of memory, huge amounts of storage and CPU. So some LLMs are not trained, okay? So they start with just massive quantities of data, but none of the data is categorized. And the term we use for that in large language models is labeled, but labeled and categorized, they're really kind of interchangeable for these purposes. So you start with large unlabeled sets. And if you execute a search on that, if you ask the AI or the LLM a question, it will take a lot of computation in order to generate the appropriate response. But if you take those data sets and they get labeled, and then you ask the same question later, it's much easier for the large language model to find the right answer. And so that it eventually is cheaper computationally, even though it requires some level of effort in order to categorize that data. Okay, so all data starts out unstructured. Okay, so let's say we have 274 people. I'm making that up right now at this presentation. Okay, so 274 people. That's unstructured data. You don't know what to do with it. Yes, we're on StreamYard. That's a piece of data. Yes, Carrie is here as our moderator. That's a piece of data, but none of it is categorized. So what you need to do is you need to have the data sorted. And so you build these data models by saying, okay, this is good data and this is bad data. Okay. And the human will go through and sort that data. So I wrote a machine learning based test that's on GitHub called Crest. And Crest, one of the machine learning based things it does is it will analyze a URL, the content in the URL, and it will tell you whether or not the heading structure is correct. And it's done that because I gave it, a 1,000 different sets of good data and said, these URLs, this heading structure is all good. And then I gave it 300 examples of bad data. And then the unknown data comes in. So the unknown data would be the URL you're asking. And if it matches the good model, that would be marked as a pass. And if it matches the bad model, that gets bounced. So that ends up being marked as a fail. And so that's how you can take something that is more, subjective, like whether or not heading structure is any good, that used to take a human in order to analyze that. Sorry, my down button is really fussy today. And you can actually automate it. So that was one of the first, or at least very early examples of how you could use machine learning in order to automate header testing and also keyboard focus indicator testing. We did the same thing with, I think the header testing had a 92% success rate. And the keyboard focus indicator had 100% success rate. So if you are using that automated tool on top of whatever other automated tools you are using, it increases the amount that you can test automatically, and it decreases the amount that you have to test manually. Okay, so that's the end of the introduction, I promise. Now we're going to get into the serious, okay, what does this mean to me? What can I do with this? Well, first of all, LLMs, large language models, obviously the word language is in there. It's really, really, really good at handling anything having to do with speech, okay? So it does better speech to text and text to speech transitions. It's really good at summarizing text. So you could put in all of the text from a bug ticket. Let's say you had a ticket that took 6 months to get resolved, and there were comments from designers and developers and accessibility people. It will actually take all of that and it will summarize it. It's good at converting text into plain language. We'll talk about more why that's important and how to use it later. It's good at tone detection. Tone detection is something that really benefits people who are autistic. So if I'm autistic and I'm sending an email to my boss and it's an important email and I want to make sure that the tone is right, but because I'm autistic, maybe I don't have the best sense of tone, you can actually take that email text, run it through ChatGPT, and it will give you the tones. It will say, that sounds aggressive, or that sounds passive, or that sounds informational. And that will help you refine your email to convey the tone that you want to convey, even though maybe your tone detection isn't the same as everybody else's. LLMs are really good at translation. So it's getting much easier to translate English to Spanish, for example, without getting the errors. Like I had this one paragraph I was trying to send to Ecuador once, and my Spanish is okay, but not awesome. And so I ran it through Google Translate. This was a few years back. And I had the word kids in it because we were talking about children, and it translated it as baby goats, okay, cabritos instead of niños. It just completely misunderstood the use of a word that can be used two very completely different ways. So LLMs have gotten much better at context sensitivity, where it can detect what it thinks that ambiguous word is and give you the right translation for it. Where that's particularly useful is for alt text. So in alt text, it's getting much better at object recognition and telling you in the context sensitive way what is going on in that image. It's still not all the way there yet, but it's definitely light years better than PowerPoint. I had a PowerPoint picture once with a picture of me shooting on my archery range, and it said nature. Right, person in nature, I think was the suggested alt text. So hopefully that suggested alt text will get much better. Where it really should have been, woman in wheelchair with, on archery range. Okay. Object identification, navigation, and wayfinding, LLMs are really good at. It can give you very specific directions. It can tell you, if you put in a video, it can tell you where the objects are. It can give you approximate distances. So that's pretty useful, especially to people who are blind. There is an advanced voice assistant where you can tell it to do things entirely through voice. And some of that has been misused in the past. So there was a famous case where ChatGPT, the person who was interfacing with it said that they were blind even though that they weren't, and tricked ChatGPT into getting a password key for something. So I think that that's been resolved now, but there's still a lot of things that you can do with voice so that you don't have to use all your spoons typing. Definitely a lot in the way of customized learning and education. So you can put in a resume and you can say, I want to go to this career from this resume. Tell me what classes I should take, what webinars I should view, what certifications should I get. And so that's really good because then people don't have to sit through stuff that they already know. It's very customized. Healthcare is a significant breakthrough with AI. Unfortunately, good and bad, right? It's Jessica Rabbit. It's not one or the other. It's just drawn that way. So a bad use of AI is that insurance companies have been using AI to turn down care. Okay, and so there's this case right now. I believe it's with Cigna, where 90% of the AI decisions are being overturned by humans. And so that would be a bad use of the AI. Good use of AI is there are now models, so these supervised learning that we talked about earlier, where people have you can feed an echocardiogram into a LLM that's been trained that way, and it will tell you how likely the person is to have a heart attack. And it actually has a higher success rate than human cardiologists. So things like viewing echocardiograms, viewing mammograms, and looking for cancer, it will pick up very, very, very subtle things that sometimes humans miss. And then monitoring activities, that's also one that could be good or bad. Generating code is something that LLMs can do. You have to keep in mind, if you're putting code into an LLM and you're saying, give me back better code or write a function that interfaces with this code, you actually just put your code out into the LLM. So your code can then be used for other people's coding questions and examples. And so that's something that Samsung found out the hard way because their engineers were putting Samsung proprietary code into the LLM and it actually became public. All right, so now that we've talked about what you can do generally with LLMs, let's talk about what is specific to accessibility. So the first thing is you can get really good test automation from LLMs. LLMs will write drafts of test plans. So you can say, hey, I have a shopping cart. My shopping cart does X, Y, and Z. Write me a test plan to test that with the screen reader. And it will actually generate a pretty darn decent test plan. It's not perfect, but it's something that's good to start with that you can then edit to customize for your own purposes. Okay, it can make accessibility recommendations. So if you say, I have this bug that's preventing this person with this assistive technology from doing something, how do I fix it? It will actually give you back accessibility recommendations. So LLM, or at least ChatGPT, is up to date as of about 18 months ago, I think. So it's not going to have anything yet for WCAG 2.2. Because its universe is data as of, I think, August of a year ago. But eventually, the data will be expanded. It can generate VBAT text. So something I did at my last job was, remember I said it was good at summarizing bug tickets? I wrote some Python code which looked at a bug database and then told me, it summarized the bugs and it told me what parts of the VPAT that those bug descriptions should go into. Again, it takes something that's usually very mundane, very manual. I don't know anybody who wakes up in the morning and says, yay, I get to author a VPAT today. It's something that nobody really enjoys doing. And it makes it much faster because you can get those text summaries and those location recommendations from the program. It can improve product consistency. So you can take two products, or especially two products within a single company, and say, look at these two products and tell me where the error messages are different. Tell me where the dialogues are different. And it can actually analyze that and give you recommendations to improve your product consistency. And then it can also improve product user interaction. So another thing that I did when I was at VMware is I wrote a chat bot to generate error messages. So before VMware got bought by Broadcom, about 2/3 of our developers did not speak English as their native language. Now, that's not a bad thing. It just means that you would occasionally get error messages that had just slight grammar mistakes, or it would have verb object instead of object verb, because English was our main language. And so it actually then, instead of the developers authoring their own error messages, they answered the questions in the chatbot and the error message was authored for them. Okay, so we've talked a lot about ChatGPT. So it's chat because it's got a chatbot, and then GPT is the generative pre-trained transformer. They're actually on version 4.0 now, and I think O is the letter O. It literally just came out a couple of days ago, so I haven't had a chance to look at the improvements yet. But it's been trained on a massive amount of internet data, and it can generate human-like text and images and videos based on the input it receives. And you can give it the input as the form of a question, and that's where we get into that define, search, predict. You define the question, it does the search, and then it predicts the answer. Or you can give it text, you can give it code, you can give it a design, and it can do whatever action that you've asked it to do. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. One of the things that I'm really a big fan of, and this is an extreme example, is using ChatGPT to generate plain language. So where you feed it text and you set a grade level. You say, hey, ChatGPT, here's this paragraph. I want you to rewrite it in 8th grade level, or I want you to rewrite it in 14th grade level, if it's something where all of your users have been to college. So I chose a paragraph that is very meaningful to people in the US. Most people who went to high school in the US had to read Moby Dick or had to read Shakespeare. And so I have a paragraph here, which is the very first paragraph of Moby Dick. And it says, call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. It's a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation. And of course, the big headache for all the American high school students is, what the hell did that mean? And so I asked it to rewrite that paragraph in 8th grade level English. You can call me Ishmael. A few years ago, I didn't have much money. There wasn't anything interesting for me to do on land, so I decided to go on a little sea adventure. It helped me feel better when I was feeling down, and it made me feel healthier. Okay, much, much more understandable. Now, I'm not suggesting that Moby Dick should be rewritten in plain language. Okay, that's not what it's about. And that kind of a little bit defeats the exercise of understanding and translating in high school what this means in terms of action and activities. But what it does do is it helps people who don't have the complicated language skills. And that can be people with learning differences. It can be people who are English language learners. It can be people with intellectual and developmental delays. And it translates this into something that they can actually consume. Okay, it's not the same, but it's awfully close. And without the plain language transformation, Moby Dick would be unavailable in terms of comprehension to a lot of people. So that's kind of an abstract, flowery type of example. And then I have a more specific example. So about a year ago, we had this test in the United States of the national wireless emergency alert system. And everybody who had a cell phone got this text message at the same time. So the language that they started with is, this is a test of the National Wireless Emergency Alert System. The purpose is to maintain and improve alert and warning capabilities at the federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial levels, and to evaluate the nation's public alert and warning capabilities. No action is required by the public. Now, you know, governments, there was probably 30 people sitting in a room together with multiple meetings, refining this text over and over and over and over until that was the text that they decided to go with. Well, this text had a 14th grade reading level. Okay. Do you know how many people in the US have a 14th grade reading level ability? About a third. Okay, so that means 2/3 of the people who reside in the US could not understand 100% of this message. So I took that message, I fed it into ChatGPT, and I said, give this to me at an 8th grade reading level. Okay, and what it gave back to me is, this is a test of a nationwide emergency alert system. The goal is to make sure we can send important alerts and warnings effectively at national, state, local, tribal, and territorial levels. We want to see how well our system works for the public. You don't need to do anything during this test. Okay, that is an 8th grade reading level, which about 80% of the United States could understand that. So this is some examples of some of the plain language transformations that you can do with ChatGPT. Okay, there are drawbacks to using artificial intelligence in ChatGPT. So first is that sometimes ChatGPT or LLMs, large language models in general, hallucinate. And that means that it just makes stuff up because it can't find the answer for you, and it's exiting incorrectly. So that's happening less and less as the models refine over time, but it will still happen that you will get the wrong answer. And so that's one of the reasons why I always reinforce, we're not at the stage yet where we can let the AI run on its own without human supervision. So definitely, like for example, when you're authoring ACRs and VPATs, you still have to have a human review it. When you're authoring error messages, still want a human to review it. Because sometimes it will generate the wrong answer, or sometimes it will generate an answer that is so wrong you can't figure out how it ever got that answer. And the second is what we call hallucinations. Okay, another thing is that AI has data bias associated with it. If you ask ChatGPT right now, give me an image of somebody who's autistic, you're going to get white male. And that's because the internet is biased, and that's where ChatGPT drew its information from. Okay, women are autistic, people of color are autistic, but the most information on the internet is about white men because that's where the studies have taken place. So you have to be careful about data bias in AI, especially having to do with gender, race, and disability, because it doesn't have enough good information yet on those topics. Hopefully that will change, but that's going to take time because the internet is going to have to change in order for ChatGPT to change. Okay, there are intellectual property issues. ChatGPT or OpenAI, which is the name of the company that owns ChatGPT, they used people's writing. You can go in there and you can say, write this paragraph in the voice of Sherry Bernhaber. Okay, because it has 300 blog articles on me that it has consumed. It knows my voice. Okay, so there are authors who are engaged in lawsuits right now because they're like, hey, you used my my intellectual property and I'm not getting any money for it. So go into this aware that there is litigation ongoing that may end up impacting users in the future. Okay, ChatGPT is set up using a freemium model, which means part of it is free, But if you want something really good, you have to pay more. So if you're using the free version of ChatGPT, you get 8 queries every 3 hours for free. Which means you really have to think about the queries that you're asking it before you submit them, because you don't want to get the wrong information and then have to use another query to refine that. But for $20 a month, you get more queries and you get the more current large language model, which is 4.0. So, that's a choice that you need to make based on your own financial situation. And sometimes the rules at your work, because of the intellectual property issues, sometimes people aren't allowed to use ChatGPT or any outside AI for work. Okay, the output may not be in your voice. So, for example, going back to our Moby Dick example, you don't hear Herman Melville's voice in the plain language transformation. So you need to keep in mind, you can do things that include your voice, but sometimes it's not possible and you lose that voice. Okay, there are ChatGPT detectors. They're not great yet, but some of them are good enough. And this has to do more with the educational setting, because of course, professors are concerned that people are using ChatGPT to generate their essays or generate code that they're submitting. And so just like the Turnitin program that some universities use, checks for plagiarism, eventually it may also end up starting to check for ChatGPT. So that was kind of everything I wanted to talk about today. And I'm hoping that there are lots of questions now in the chat window.
There are lots of questions. Thank you so much, Sherry. I've learned a lot myself. Lots of questions I have as well. So I'm going to hit you up later on LinkedIn or some other social media. If you have any recommendations on.
I was just going to say, by the way, I'm really good about LinkedIn. There's only 2 Bernhabers on the planet, one of whom I gave birth to. So definitely, I always answer questions that come in from LinkedIn.
Perfect. All right. So we have a lot of questions, but I want to start with Imelda's question first. They're asking, has Sherry tested the AI with other offerings such as Hemingway or Grammarly? And curious of how those will handle the examples she mentioned.
So Hemingway and Grammarly both have really good tone detectors. I've been using the Grammarly tone detector for probably about 18 months before ChatGPT became publicly available. I really like it. In terms of plain language conversion, it's not as good at that yet. What it's focusing on is the structure that you give it and making that structure better. So it might warn you, for example, that a verb is in passive tense, but it won't necessarily say things like, "Oh, this sentence needs to go first," or things like that. So it's more of a lower level, grammar checker, spell checker, avoiding passive voice thing, but not so great yet at converting to plain language, although I'm just starting to see hints of that being included in Grammarly. I know less about Hemingway because I use Grammarly.
Yep, that makes complete sense. Yeah, both good programs, and I'm sure we'll see more AI in the future. Oh, yeah. So, Regine, like this is not on the GAD day, especially. Can we get WCAG written in plain English?
So I don't know the
Feel
answer
free
to
to
that.
pass. Feel free to pass if it's too controversial.
Okay, so let me tell you what we're doing. Apologies for new stuff. So, for example, I am the co-lead of the maturity model subgroup, and we're currently doing a plain language pass over our entire draft before we republish it. So for new stuff, we're definitely taking plain language into account. The problem with WCAG is WCAG has been adopted by regulations, which means WCAG is now part of laws. in the US, in the EU, in Canada, in Australia, probably more places than that, but that's the ones that pop into the top of my mind. So we have to be very careful about changes that we make to that because it impacts laws. Should somebody do a plain language rewrite of WCAG and publish it as a book? Probably. Can W3C do that? Not so much. But we are focusing on that for new things before they get adopted by laws. So we've received that feedback, and when I say we, it's because I work with W3C on some of this stuff. So great question. Probably not the answer you wanted, but it's the answer that's reality, and that's what I'm known for.
Well, we appreciate the candor and the honesty. I know that 3.0 is talking about doing a lot more with plain language, and so maybe in version 3.0 we might see some of that too.
Right,
Awesome.
because it hasn't been adopted yet. So you can anything that hasn't been adopted, we're definitely paying more attention to plain language.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. I'm going to go over to Sean's question here. Are there any other popular assistant tools like the recent GPT integration into Be My Eyes?
Yeah, so I saw the ad for that. Wasn't super impressed. I think it's the short ad, which is the one that I saw, had things like descriptions of ducks swimming on a lake, and a description of whether or not the king was in residence based on the presence of a flag. So I think for object recognition stuff, that's good. My concern is that as long as GPTs can hallucinate, are you really going to trust it to tell you whether or not it's safe to cross the street? And there was one particular comment that the GPT made that I thought was actually kind of offensive, which was, it was like, great job hailing the taxi. Okay. People with disabilities don't want to be praised for doing things that people without disabilities don't think twice about. So again, there's this data bias that until that gets weeded out of the system, it's not going to be exactly what we want. Is it progress? 100%. Is it the be all and end all? Not quite there yet.
Amazing. Yeah, I've seen some hallucinations in my time. And once an image recognition told me that Europe was a face of an animal. So I don't trust it as well either. So definitely use your best judgment when you are looking at AI, especially now. Kind of a question of my own. Do you see that changing in the future or the near future? Or what would you put a date on it if you think like when you would start to trust it? Or is it more less of a date and more of a checkbox?
I wouldn't give it a date yet because I don't have, the knowledge of the inner workings of OpenAI as a company. For example, it's gone much faster than I thought it was going to. As somebody who worked in AI, oh God, 35 years ago, where it was more of a rules-based system, I was involved with writing some software that would select tax returns to audit, where you would say, okay, if somebody donates 10% of their income to charities and they live in these states, let it pass. Like if they live in Utah, chances are there's enough super religious people in Utah that tithe that's normal. But in some other states, maybe in combination with some other data points, it would get some attention. So, and that's where we were 35 years ago, and we kind of went where I'm making the hockey stick, where it was flat with a slight curve up, and then all of a sudden we hit an inflection point, and it went astronomically quickly. So again, it's about the sources of the data. If you're at a big company building its own GPT and you've got enough employees that you've got ethical oversight, you can build a GPT or an LLM, a large language model that doesn't have bias. Okay. But what's available in the public right now, is 100% biased.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for letting me ask my own question. Getting back to the audience questions, we have a question here from Mike. Any suggestions on how to set up a query to get higher quality issue summaries? I've tried it in the past without much success.
So on the one that I built at VMware, okay, so I'm going to provide that as an example. We predefined lots of things about the bugs, about how to detect what was important and how to discard it, and how to discard, the trivia and the minutia in the bug that doesn't need to go in the ticket. So by predefining a bunch of rules and training that, saying this is a good bug summary, this is a bad bug summary, that's one of the ways that you can get better summaries.
Awesome. Hopefully that answered your question, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And kind of tagged on to what I was asking too about, what do we think is going to be the scale, or when can you trust it, right? Or when is it going to improve? And it sounds like it's complicated,
Yeah.
right? Like everything in accessibility too. All right, so we got a question here from Dynamite. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just reading ahead, so I was about to answer the question, but go ahead and ahead and read it out.
Yeah. Let me read it just in case anyone's listening that can't see the question on the screen. So Dynamite asked, in general, do you think AI adoption is happening too quickly? And are there other negatives or positives? Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm going to answer this in two parts because it's actually two questions that have been combined. Do I think AI adoption is happening too quickly? Well, let me ask this question. Does technology adoption in general happen too quickly? And the answer is yes. And AI is no exception from that. The adoption of technology always happens faster than the ethical use of that technology. And so that's really a problem because all of these companies, and this goes back to the Uber, even the Uber Lyft days outside of AI, where you've got two people who are competing and it's feature, 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 and who gets the features out first. And they ignore the laws. They ignored accessibility. They ignored customer safety. They ignored privacy. And so that's what happens. So we've got the same thing going here where LLMs, public-facing ones, are the wild, wild west, where everybody's trying to do it better, faster, cheaper, and they're not paying attention to things like the ethical use of that data. Now, after some very high publicity mistakes, GPT built in firmer guardrails, and those are still evolving. But the horse had already left the barn, right? The problems happened and then they got fixed. It wasn't that they predicted the problems, which frankly were very predictable, and made sure that it wasn't a problem before it launched.
Yeah.
And I think as long as this is done in a for-profit mechanism where most of it is, then that's always going to be an issue. And it's not just AI, it's business behavior and technology in general.
Yep, it's the same old tech problem. It sounds like just a different flavor. So going back to Dynamite's second part of the question.
Yeah, as long as companies think that. Oh. As long as companies think that AI is a way to save money by replacing humans with computers, that's going to be a problem with the rapid adoption because the data just isn't there yet. And, you can't just have a wayfinding system in a hallway. You still need a person there in case the person doesn't understand the wayfinding system. So we're not at a point yet where we can replace people 100% with technology. And when we do, things go wrong.
Very good points. Very good. Did you, okay, we're gonna move on to Lay's question here. What are your thoughts on disabled people using the LLMs to standardize their language to prevent bias from language errors? For example, I've had strokes, but also feel mistakes need to be public.
I think that this is a voice thing. So I had a discussion
Mm.
with another accessibility person about this, where I had suggested that they run it through to check for grammar problems, and he said, "No, the grammar problems are part of who I am." So I think if you want to keep that voice and you want to be authentic with the way your brain works, then don't use the LLM because you're going to lose
Mhm.
that. If you're, let's say, updating text on a resume
Mhm.
or something where people don't necessarily know the real you, then maybe you do use it so that you do avoid that bias from people saying, oh, that person's grammar is terrible.
Thank you for those examples. That's a great question. Kat was asking, I see that Crust is archived. Are you going to update and re-release it?
So VMware is no more. We got brought by Broadcom about a year ago, and so that's why it's been archived. I've been
Mm.
working on a different startup, and so I haven't had a chance to go back and revisit Crest. If people were interested in that and they wanted my input on the original code and where it was that we wanted to improve it, I'd be happy to have a couple of meetings and get involved.
Amazing. Thanks, Kat, for the question. All right. Going back to another earlier question, Regine was saying heading structure has been tested automatically for a long time. What does AI add for that specific success criteria check?
Yeah, so the heading structure mostly in the past had been checked to make sure that it was in the right order and that levels hadn't been skipped. Occasionally, you would have a check to see if the heading was too long. So it might check to see
Mhm.
if the heading was more than 100 characters. If it was more than 100 characters, chances are it wasn't about navigation for people who are blind. It was more about font or styling or some other. So, what AI adds to it is it adds context checking. So you can see a heading that says, win a vacation, and a paragraph after it that talks about repairing popcorn makers, and
Hmm.
it can actually tell that that's Crest will tell you that's a violation. Because
Cool.
those two things are not related and they should go together. So that's what machine learning and Crest added to those heading checks. Um, Sorry, can you go back to her? I was going to give another example for Crest since
Mhm.
people seem to actually be interested in it. Um, Crest used image processing to check for keyboard focus indicators. So it would actually simulate paths throughout an entire page, and then it would compare the images and say, yes, I see that there is a change in this image. That change is the focus indicator, and so that's how image processing was able to check for focus indicators, and it could also check the contrast of the focus indicator, which is something that up until that point could only be done manually. It could check to see if videos had captions. So that was
Mhm.
another thing that Crest did. So lots of things that are important, but in the past required a human to sit there and figure it out.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good thing to talk about. We have one question from Dynamite who was asking, what's your dream use case for AI usage in accessibility?
So I guess my dream case would be the ability to create really complex personas. Where you could say, imagine Steve. Steve has retinitis pigmentosa. Steve just started using a cane 4 years ago. So, super built out details of pretend, for lack of a better word, disabilities with very detailed use of assisted technology and barriers, and then have the code behavior tested against those personas. If you want to simulate right now you're doing user research, okay, and you need a left-handed person with glaucoma and blue eyes, okay, you're going to struggle to find that person. But if you could build a persona for that into the large language model and then say interpret this behavior through that persona, I think that would provide a lot of insights to companies that just don't invest in user research. And I'm not saying it'll replace user research. It should not replace user research. But when you don't have the money to do user research, that might be something that's better than nothing.
That's a great answer. Well, we have time for one more question, and this is something that actually Jennifer was asking about, and something I'm actually wondering about too. What do you think the potential for compliance tests to be caught mostly by the AI, and then industry folks, subject matter experts, for instance, can shift their focus to better experiences and gaps and the user research you just mentioned. Same for the compliance reporting, which you did touch on a little bit, the VPATs. But what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are use AI to replace stuff that's mundane, that's boring, that's time intensive, that any accessibility specialist with at least a year's worth of experience could do. And then don't fire those people, refocus them on things like switch testing and sip and puff devices and things that we should be supporting that almost nobody ever does because there's never enough time and you have to spend too much of your energy testing the 65% of behavior that can only be done manually.
It's an amazing answer. Thank you so much, Sherry, today for all of your time. Again, you can find Sherry over on LinkedIn if you have additional questions or you just want to follow all of her amazing posts, archery posts, but other things as well. This has been a dream to have you on the show.
I try not to post about archery more than once a month, but when I have something really cool happen, it's kind of hard not to. What was I going to say? I've moved all of my newsletters to Buttondown. So I ditched Medium because it wasn't accessible, and I went to Substack. I ditched Substack because, as somebody who married into a Jewish family, it really offended me when they wouldn't block Nazi propaganda. So now I'm on Buttondown. I have, you can subscribe there for free. If you want to give me a little bit of money to help support my work, since I'm not at VMware anymore, that would be awesome, but it's also not required. So hope to see you there.
Yeah, do you have a link that you can share with us for that? And we'll make sure to add it either in the notes or here in the comments real quick.
Let me, it's Buttondown, email. Let me see if I can find it.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I just know that other people listening might want that.
Yes, I should have copied and pasted it. Let me put it, I will put it in this chat, and then which brought up a pop-up, which I don't want to see. There we go. So that's where you can register for my newsletter. So I've got a 5-year backlog over there of just trying to think of some of my most popular article is how to do toast messages in an accessible manner. That isn't addressed anywhere, and so how to make cookie banners accessible, how to design for color blindness. There's a lot of very tactical articles, and then there's a lot of how do you make your organization more mature on accessibility. What do you want to do before you go take the disability equity index at your company, stuff like that. So there's a good mix of both the extremely strategic but also the very tactical.
I love it. Thank you so much for all you've done for the community. I love all your articles. Again, we appreciate your time today spending with us here at Ally Talks. And I just wanted to promote real quick that coming up in June, we're going to have John Jameson, and he is going to be talking about author-friendly content quality assurance with Editorially. So mark your calendars for June 12th. And we're always looking for speakers. So if you have an idea or if you're a marginalized speaker, You can reach us at team@alitalks.com. And also anyone who has IAAP certifications, AliTalk speakers and attendees, they can receive professional development credits through IAAP for your continuing education. And lastly, follow and subscribe. We have the YouTube channel, of course. You gotta always do that plug of subscribing, right, and follow us. But we're also on Twitter/X and Mastodon. Again, thank you all today for attending, and thank you, Sherry. It was an amazing talk. We all learned so much. Thank you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. See you.